Hi, everyone. Welcome to Waste 360's Nothing Wasted podcast. On every episode, we invite the most interesting people in waste, recycling, and organics to sit down with us and chat candidly about their thoughts, their work, this unique industry, and so much more. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Liz Boswell from Waste 360 with Ryan Fogelman from Fire Rover. Hi, Ryan. Thanks for talking with me today.
Hi. Oh, absolutely. Hi, Liz. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and how you ended up in waste and recycling.
Interesting. Waste and recycling. It's a fun industry. I mean, so basically, I owned a company that helped bring like new innovative products to market. So I've been doing that for years. So my background's really it's always been business development, strategic partnerships, and then I use marketing as a way to drive awareness. Just like anytime you're trying to get a new or disruptive product out there, there's an awareness factor. And honestly, the waste and recycling industry has been a very it's been surprising. I like it. It's a smaller industry. It's everybody cares. I definitely think that bringing new products to market in the industry take a little bit longer in a sense, but also once you're once you've proven what the value is, it's they're quick to embrace new technology. Where again, I've always heard kind of stories in the past that the waste and recycling industry doesn't like to focus on new technologies much, but I mean, in our case, they definitely have been very open. So we've been blessed.
Oh, that's great. And you recently published one of your latest reports. Can you give our audience some highlights from that report?
Yeah, so basically I reported in March. I've been reporting fires basically. So reported fires are fires that have been reported in any media outlet. So I only get my information from public outlets. I get a ton of people who send me emails and let me know of fires that they've had internally that they theoretically want to share. And then obviously being in Fire Rover, we have a front row seat with a lot of fires that don't happen, right? So, where we catch them early enough. But so basically, if you look at just reported fires, I've been doing that since February of 2016. And I have been trending and looking at, all the different fires. What we've seen now in the past month has been different than anything we've ever seen, right? Because, normally we'll see a summertime spike. Normally we'll see a fourth quarter spike just based on the amount of products that are going through, the consumer's hands. But, it's interesting that right now, I mean, we're like, I call this it's the 100-year spring clean out because basically in March, kind of everything shut down, and then everybody was, stuck at home from a stay-at-home order, and it seemed like, normally people will do spring cleaning, right? This was like, okay, I'm not going to spring clean. I'm literally going to spring clean my basement, my attic. I'm going to do, my garage and everything. And again, what happens when you're cleaning? You have a box of lithium ion batteries. Those lithium ion batteries, it's difficult right now, or at least it was 30 days ago, because you lost a lot of your drop-off points. So, when there's nowhere to put them, do you throw them in a waste and recycling bin? So unfortunately, in March, I saw a number of fires. We didn't have a ton of fires. I believe it was only 18, but of those, 11 of those were waste and recycling, or more waste MSW fires. And then, so I wrote the article and really looked at those numbers, and it seemed, a little bit higher. So I think we were about 55% were waste fires, and normally, over the last 4 years, waste has been running about 45 per month. But in April, I've done some of these numbers, and the first week of April, we saw 0 fires. There was one transfer station fire, period, in the first week of April. So that was kind of a shocker. Honestly, in 4 years, I've never seen one fire. I mean, we average about 7 fires a week. And again, this is only reported fires. So there could be a lot of reasons for this. Reporters were, trying to figure out what their life looked like. And, I know there's a lot of recycling that has shut down, but going back to the second week of April, we just saw, I believe it was 10 fires in the week alone. And then we've seen internally, obviously it's fires that we've put out. So, it seems that it's starting to happen, and, I'm tracking these every day, which normally I don't do that. So Thursday, I'm going to be talking with Jim Emerson, but each week on my webinar, I go through sort of what we're seeing in these fires, because again, you have a Christmas time fire like trend that has kind of pulled in early because everybody hoarded all their products, right? And then, you have a spring cleanup, and then you also have, what's happening with kids being at home, and, we're seeing a transition from commercial to at-home fire or at-home, garbage production. So, I know a lot of our OEMs are seeing the MSW grow. So, again, I think, we're all kind of, on pins and needles trying to understand what's going on. But, I definitely think that our transfer stations are at higher risk than they've been in, in a number of years.
Oh, I bet. You're probably holding your breath to see what comes of this once they open back up and start operating on a normal schedule.
Absolutely.
And I mean, to that point where you're saying more people are home and it's looking like fewer fires for now, is there anything that we can do or you're doing to educate consumers around fire risk and the reality of how making these mistakes and missteps ignite these fires?
I mean, absolutely. I think, there's three things that you can do, or at least the three things that I recommend. And I mean, one is technology, obviously. One is operational processes. So creating a fire prevention, creating a fire prevention plan, which is extremely important. And Jim Emerson, who's with Star Risk Technologies, he's actually he's one of the guys that walks through, one of the facilities and says, okay, this is the risk to the industry or to the insurance company specifically. He's actually a fire, chemical, electrical, and civil engineer. So, he takes a pretty unique approach. So Jim and I developed a combinational approach to firefighting, right? And we are on Thursday, we're going to we've repositioned it after the last 2 years. But I think to answer your question, the third leg is education. And I think, there's so much education that we can do for the public. And, we've done a lot of it. And I think, SWANA and NWRA and, there's a lot of private companies out there like Rumpke that have done, for public that have done an amazing job really saying, hey, lithium ion batteries cause fires and here's what happens on the back end. But I think the problem that we're seeing is that, like, if you look at the fire risk to our waste and recycling facilities, right? For 50 years, we've had fires, and those fires are based on just older, I call them traditional hazards, right? So, you're dealing with propane tanks and chemicals, pool chemicals and, fertilizers and aerosol cans and, all the different things like fireworks, that have been around forever. And we were dealing with these fires, since the beginning of time. The problem is when you add lithium ion batteries, it has started in 15, 16, I started talking about the wave that I thought was coming. And in around 18, we saw that like at least the first like crash. And when I say crash, we just had an influx of lithium ion batteries into our waste streams, and it happened globally. So, if you look at there's data that I have in my annual report, and I've published on in some of my editorials, but in Japan, they saw like an increase of it was almost 4 times the amount of fires that they had the year before in 18. And then also there were insurance companies in the US. So, insurance is its own issue, but, we're seeing a ton of insurers that have left the industry, and it's because of the claims data that they had. And most of the increase in claims were from shredders, which, again, that typically is a lithium ion battery theoretically. And then also actually lithium ion battery claims that were the specific cause. So, the idea is as we're educating the public to, take their lithium ion batteries and put them or, drop them off at electronic recycler, at a Lowe's or a Home Depot or at, one of Call the Recycles locations. The problem is that we're also at the same time getting hit by one more lithium ion batteries. So, if you look at your Apple earbuds, you have 3 lithium ion batteries in them. Every Juul cigarette has a lithium ion battery in them. So as we've seen the number of lithium ion batteries peripherate. I screw that up every time I say it, but as we see them increase, what we end up seeing is that, it's the education can't keep up with the amount of lithium ion batteries that are getting into our waste stream. And again, it's not going anywhere, right? And that's the issue. It's only getting worse from a numbers perspective. So, it's just something that we're going to be dealing with for a long period of time. And, education is definitely something we need to do, but, it's not the end all be all solution for keeping our facilities up and running.
Well, why do you think lithium ion batteries fail?
So, lithium ion batteries don't, like Ronald Butler, who I call him the Jedi Master of lithium ion batteries. We did a workshop, and we're actually speaking at Waste Expo this year, if it does end up happening, which we all hope it does. But we talk about lithium ion batteries. Lithium ion batteries they're extremely safe, right? They're an unbelievable power source. They carry a lot of power, and you can increase that power, and you can reuse it. And for the footprint, I mean, they are an amazing technology. Most of the time, it's like 1 in a million lithium ion batteries actually will fail from when it's manufactured to when it's delivered in its initial form, right? So if you think a car batteries don't just explode randomly, right? Now, what ends up happening is a lithium ion battery, when it's treated harshly, or when it's damaged, or when, something happens to it, right? That's where we start to see the issues. So, if you look at the automotive supply chain, that's one thing, right? It goes into a car. If a car gets in a car accident, you're now dealing with, the hazard that's involved with a lithium ion battery fire. Then, if you're dealing with most of the stuff that we're dealing in waste and recycling, which is it's personal storage. So, if you think your phone, your computer, it's all these devices that we're buying, our Apple Air, or our iPods and our AirWatch and our the Garmin's and the Fitbits and all these different products that we have. All those have the lithium ion batteries, and what ends up happening is if they're thrown into MSW, because if you're a consumer and you don't you don't bring and recycle them correctly, they just get thrown into MSW. What ends up happening? We are not gentle on our trash, right? I mean, it's just, if we were gentle on our trash, we would have to slow down the process. If we had to pre-sort every single piece of trash that went through, our operations, I mean, the price of processing our trash would go up tenfold. So, the whole kind of idea is that, if the reason that we have all these fires is because we're not gentle on our trash. And at the end of the day, I mean, if you have a lithium ion battery that's in a computer and it's on a tip floor and it gets run over, it's going to start a fire, or there's a better chance that it's going to start a fire. So that's really the precipice of it. I mean, it's a very safe technology, lithium ion batteries, but just not the way that we handle it.
Absolutely. And then, Ryan, what are some other fire threats to these facilities?
I mean, that's what I was saying. I mean, there's definitely threats that have been around forever, right? So traditional hazards include, chemicals, and, just imagine, like, somebody goes in and they have all the paint thinner and old paint, and, what do they do with it? I mean, it's almost like magic, right? You put it in your waste facility, your waste bin, and, you turn around and it's gone, right? They come and they pick it up and they put it, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. So, a lot of people call it, it's a bad word, but, they call it whatever recycling, right? So it's kind of like, hey, I just throw it in there and it disappears, and I don't get a penalty if I recycle incorrectly. I don't get a penalty if I put, things that are going to cause hazards on the back end. And honestly, if I'm not educated about exactly what happens on the back end, which most of America isn't, you're not really worried, and you're not thinking that you're doing any harm by, throwing it away, right? It seems like, hey, it's going in trash. Well, if you put pool chemicals in trash, what ends up happening? It gets in the truck, and then it causes issues. One of my fire engineer folks will basically say that, like, we create bombs in our trash. Like, so think about it this way: you change your oil during the summer, or you do a project with paint thinner and you're using rags, and you take those rags and they're soaked with, some sort of a chemical, or paint thinner, and then you throw those into one of these, a Glad bag that, these things are made not to breathe. So they're tied as tight as possible so you don't smell the smell, and you throw it in your bin. Well, you take that bin and you put it on your curbside, and it's 85-degree day outside. So it cooks, right? And that sun is beating down on the, on the receptacle, and you're going to get like 120 degrees inside. So now you have pressure that's building on this, and think, you take that and you put it into a fire truck and you apply pressure to it, and literally you've created a bomb, not knowingly, but we do this all the time.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, do you think these facilities have good standard operating procedures for, one, preventing a fire, and then two, handling a fire once it takes place?
And that's a great question. And I think the answer is 5 years ago, I would have said no. Today, I would say yes. So, when I look at fire, there's a couple ways to prevent fires, right? Or there's a couple ways to really deal with the fire issue. On the front end is prevention, right? It's good operations. And it's a fact, there's an inherent risk of fires in our operations. If you're a good operator, you are going to have less fires than if you're a bad operator, okay? So if you clear your tip floor, if you make sure that you turn it and you don't have old material, if there's a lot of things you can do from an operational perspective that, you can make sure that your piles are at a low enough level that, they're not, if you have a 30-foot building and you have piles that are 24, 25 feet high, well, there's a bigger chance that if there's a fire that you're not going to be able to deal with that issue. So again, if you're a better operator, you're going to have less fires, but even good operators have fires, right? So, really the idea is there's that prevention side of it, and that's the fire planning. And then there's also the disaster planning, which is part of fire planning. So the things that you can do to ensure that a firefighter is actually going to come and fight your fire. So with that being said, if you don't want your employees to fight a fire, and you know that typically when a tip floor starts a fire, there's a lot of smoke that'll happen, and you basically prepare for the fire department to arrive. There are Lancer nozzles that you can lay out, and you can actually have the hoses connected to the fire extinguishers, and you can do a lot of different things to ensure that when the fire department gets there, they don't spend the time setting up, but it's already set up. Now, again, you're not a fire brigade at that point. You're considered, basically, you're helping the fire department. We have these enforcer units that are CAF units that, you can have ready and set up for the fire department to get there. So when they get there, you got to think the fire department, and this goes into the second piece of it, which is the professional response. So the better relationship you have with your fire department, the faster and the better chance that they're actually going to be able to fight your fire in a waste or recycling facility. So, if the fire department knows what the lock is for your code, and it doesn't take them 5 minutes to get inside your facility, if the fire department if they bend to your facility and they understand where your equipment's laid out inside the building, it's a better chance that they're going to do more than just a containment, which containment is when they put a 75-foot hose and a 50-foot hose and they just drop water in, and basically they go and they take a defensive posture and fight the fire, and really they're just protecting the public at that time. And then there's that middle ground, right? And that middle ground is, again, it's prevention and good operations. And then on the other side, the bookends are, the other side is the professional response. The middle response is really where we have an opportunity to say, okay, how do we fight these fires, and how do we get to and pre-wet and pre-treat fires before they start, or during the incipient stages? And that's where a product like mine comes in, which is the Fire Rover, where, we're looking at, from a thermal perspective, we're looking at, a heat abnormality. So, we're constantly, looking at a tip floor to see. And, if you go and look at our YouTube page, there's so many different events, and a lot of our customers don't allow that we share videos, but a lot of our customers do. And they follow the approach that I like to follow, which is, it's basically the Volvo approach of safety knows no competition. You're not going to be more profitable because of safety, right? I mean, so we should all share all the learnings that we have. And I'm fortunate that a lot of my customers, the executives, are really believe in that. So as we share these videos, you can see exactly what we're dealing with. And again, if you see a lithium ion battery that explodes, we hit it, we pre-wet it before there's thermal runaway. there's no issue, right? It's been taken care of. The fire department gets there and we call the fire department, they get there and there's no issue. If we start to pre-wet, if you think like a tip floor, a lot of times the biggest mistake that our guys will do is you'll have a loader operator and they'll see smoke. So they'll go in and they'll literally try to dig the fire out. The problem is you're supposed to pre-wet that, because the minute you add oxygen to it, all of a sudden, you're creating a bigger issue. So that's why, like, we'll spray it. And then once you know that there's no fire and the heat's been dissipated, then you go in and you start to pull the layers back to try to make sure that you get the fire. So again, I know I'm going kind of on, but at the same time, it's like there's a lot of different areas that we can work on. And, the good operators who invest in, all three of those parts are the ones that are going to have the least amount. The ones that only invest in one or the other, unfortunately, it's a reality. And, insurers these days are requiring that you have a plan and that you're operating like in a way that makes sense, where 5 years ago they weren't requiring like they are. They truly understand the risks, and it's not because of the media that's gone out and shared this, and it's not because of even the executives that have gone out and shared it, because a lot of the the major executives are talking about it, but it's really been the claims, right? It's a numbers game for them. If the claims are higher and they're not making money, then they're going to raise your rates, period.
Absolutely. And speaking of the insurance agencies, I mean, are they pricing themselves out? Is it becoming almost like, the healthcare industry? Or are they trying to put in disclaimers about lithium ion batteries, and how's that all working?
Yeah, I mean, the insurance industry it's a problem unto itself, right? And I think what happened, and I used Nathan Bernard's data. He's with the Insurance Office of America, and basically he had actual claims data for 16, 17, and 18. And the reason I used his data originally was because I wanted to prove that the reported numbers were good numbers, and they were actually eerily similar, right? The amount of fires that we had each year for those three, plus the amount of actual claims that he had. But what's happening with the insurance companies is they've run, right? I mean, we went from having like 50 insurers, and I think it's down to less than 5 in 18, 19. And now, again, it really depends on your profile of your business. So, if you look at a property insurance on a MRF, typically it's 10 million to about 100 million, depending if you could be as low as a non-automated without robots and all the other things. And then, to the highest end, I think the highest end would be about 100 grand or 100 million. And I think, so if you look at it, a lot of the OEMs that have fleets, so, where you're protecting a fleet for, basically if you have 1,000 trucks, you get that insurance, and then that insurance company is going to be more apt to give you property insurance. A lot of the operators out there that only have a site, an operation, are the ones having the major issues. But what's really happening is insurance companies are afraid. And I work with a ton of insurance companies. I'm trying to get insurers back in the industry. So if you look at it and you say, okay, and I get this question all the time, like if I put a Fire Rover in, do I get a 5% discount? And really, that idea doesn't make sense. It's not like insurance for your car. Insurance for your car, they take a risk based on like every car in the area. They take a risk based on how many thefts are in the area that you're spending your 5-mile radius. And, they have so much data. For waste recycling, hazard material, any sort of industrial operations, what they're doing is they're basically looking at a site's risk profile, and then they're taking that risk profile and they're deciding whether or not you're a good risk based on that. And that's where they make a decision whether A, you're insurable. So, a lot of these guys theoretically can be uninsurable. And if they're going to give you, if you're higher risk, they'll give you insurance. But a lot of the insurance companies that used to take a full amount of risk, so let's just say they said, okay, your deductible is $20 million and it's $100 million, so we'll take $80 million in risk. What's happening now is that a lot of insurance companies are coming in and layering that. So they'll say, I'll take the first 20 million. Next guy says, I'll take the second 20 million, and they're all at different rates. And so a lot of these brokers are out there basically trying to package, good products together. And then, so the idea is, like, if you put a Fire Rover in, theoretically, right, and it depends on how you do it, you're going to get a lower risk profile, which gives you a lower insurance rate. then if you have a fire prevention plan that has teeth, then you're going to get a lower insurance rate. And if you have a history of good operations without having issues, you're going to get a lower, risk profile, which gives you a lower insurance rate and a better chance of getting insurance. So really, I mean, it's almost like, they're looking at everything that you've done. And, in the old days, like one of the guys that I'm talking with is Jim Emerson, but, in the old days, he would go in and they would basically check the box and say, okay, so this MRF, do you have a safety policy? Yep, check. Do you have this? Yep, check. I expect you to do this, this, and this, check, 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 and we're good, right? But, they really didn't look at whether or not you were doing it. They just said, do you have it, right? Where, that was 5, 6, 10 years ago. Now, I mean, they're looking at everything. They're like, you have a fire plan? Let me see it. Let me see how it's implemented. And then they're sending, fire engineers and engineers out to do audits of these facilities to ensure that they're actually staying and keeping and doing what they say that they're going to do to get the insurance rates that they're getting. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it's definitely a little bit of a mess out there. But I mean, I literally spend probably, if I say 30% of my time working with insurance companies to get them to understand that, there is a way to mitigate risk, even with the risks that are out there.
Absolutely. And then, Ryan, I know you're pretty active on LinkedIn, and you recently shared a very interesting pig story. Can you elaborate on that one?
Oh man, Anne Germain is going to be really happy. So I'll give her credit for that 100%. And I think, with Fire Rover, we started in the scrap metal industry, and I mean, our solution is patented. Waste and recycling has been we've been blessed that they've taken our solution and just embraced it the way they have, right? I mean, we're in 8 of the top 10, largest waste and recycling companies. We're in a ton of mom and pops, and we're really starting to get into municipalities and others, but we're always looking for other applications. So like hangar protection for airplanes. They have a deluge system, and with like refineries, and we're constantly looking, like we're doing more battery storage operations, which is the larger operations where you think the OEMs of the automotive space that are building electric vehicles. So we're getting involved in those supply chains. So what's interesting is one of the other industries that we were looking at, and, we have a couple insurers that are, that insure this market, but it is poultry and, if there's a fire in poultry or in, with animal, with farming or with, agribusiness. And then originally we looked at horse stables because, with a horse stable, you're literally, most of the horses will run back in the stable when there's a fire because they believe that's the safest place. So, if you put a system like ours in, if we see it and we can put a fire out, or we can spray it so that when the horses come back in, that, they're not, that they're not in danger. So we were looking at this, and I'm working with an insurer on this. And then Ann brought this up that basically they have a poultry farm in, I would call it a pork farm or a pig farm, and they're doing free range pigs. And the idea was that to prove that the pigs are free range, they put pedometers on their legs, and so that they can say that they've walked more than being stuffed into a large a large area and not being able to move, which again, it's horrific, but at the same time, I mean, we know it happens. But basically a pig ate a pedometer off another pig, and then it ate it, and then it pooped it out, and the lithium ion battery exploded. So, I mean, it's just, I think it's a big area that they don't have fire protection, and you would think that they do, right? So they kind of look at it as an insurance issue. If you lose 350,000 chickens or, 50,000 pigs, it's okay because they were going to be eaten anyways, right? And I think it's horrific, right? So, there needs to be fire protection inside these locations. And, this was a perfect example how lithium ion batteries are literally in freaking everything. And as much as you want to try to, take a lithium ion battery and pre-sort it out of a waste and recycling facility, it's almost impossible with the amount of batteries that are out there in our markets.
That story is crazy, and to your point, they are everywhere. And I didn't even consider until I was reading something that you had written I mean, even the animated greeting cards, you forget that they're in there, and that's something consumers easily toss when they're done with them and don't think twice about it. So there's a huge educational component to this that just has to be ongoing, right?
Well, and I think you just said it, right? I mean, like, the best way for a MRF to like not have lithium ion batteries in their stream is to pre-sort it, right? So now you have to slow down and pre-sort. But the issue, like you just said, I mean, if I see a greeting card, do we have to open every single greeting card to see the ones that make noise and the ones that don't? Right. So like, even if you're doing pre-sort and you're one of the essential workers, right, you're not going to pull the greeting card out, right? Like, so it just takes a level of sophistication that it'd be very difficult for us to have. So, I mean, personally, and again, I don't know, a lot of people agree with this or not. I agree that we have to have some sort of a deposit program. So, with a Juul cigarette, when you're done with it, you take it back and you get something for it. And the reason I kind of agree with that is just, I'm from Michigan, and we always had, a bottle deposit program. And again, you can't slow down your operation because, right now, I mean, we pre-sort probably as much as we can until we get to automation and robotics and all the other AI things that, they're working on now. But, the idea again is that if we at least have some sort of value to a lithium ion battery that we can bring it back, hopefully that provides some incentive to, it's not going to provide too much incentive, because again, like, you don't want to have it so that people are stealing your phone just to get a $20 battery. So it has to be low enough, that it's worth it, but, or small enough that it's worth it, not high enough that, it causes other behavior or bad behavior. But, at the end of the day, like, that would allow us to at least get some percentage of lithium out of the stream. But again, I mean, someone was telling me that I think there's 4 mega factories, and there's going to be by 2030, there's lithium ion battery, like, mega facilities that create them, and there'll be 90 facilities in the next 10 years. I mean, the number is not going away. And, I did a lithium ion battery, I did a workshop, and I was really surprised because, and I wrote about this in one of my articles, but it was, one of these labs, the government labs, they always talk about, and you see on USA Today, or you'll see in like some of these media outlets, they'll basically say, hey, new water-based battery, holds just as much electricity and doesn't cause fires. But that's not real, right? Like, people are working on those, but the reason they're promoting that is to get grants. And those grants, it's like, they do such a small, minuscule amount. That's why, like, you see it, you can't get excited, and then nothing happens to it 5 years later. So if you think today, we just created, you and I, Liz, we're the smartest people in the world. We just created this perfect battery. The chances of us getting that battery, commercializing it, getting it to a price that's affordable, and putting it into every piece of equipment, or replacing every lithium ion battery, and then getting all the trillions of lithium ion batteries that are out there out of the waste stream, would be an enormous, immense project, right? And we're not even close to that. It's actually the opposite. So, I think it's one of those things that, I mean, lithium ion batteries, the good, bad, and ugly, are going to be with us for a long period of time. And again, if you look at automotive OEM, the battery supply chain for automotive lithium ion batteries is actually really good. It's like 90-something%, just like lead acid batteries in cars are the same thing. So that supply chain actually works really well. And there's a lot of really smart guys working on that. The problem is that the personal storage side of it, where you're storing a 1970s song that you open up that says, let's celebrate, for your birthday, and that's being thrown in, and basically gets in a shredder, and could, if it's next to and in the right situation, it causes a major fire and can burn down one of our facilities. Sorry, right. I don't mean to be so negative. I mean, like,
well, no, but I think it gets it gets the point across, Ryan, and there is a threat, and it's mitigating that and doing everything we can to do that. So I appreciate you being so candid and talking about preparation in all phases. So I think the audience will get a lot out of that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So are you going to do another report once we're out of this pandemic and do some comparisons and see where we are at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, so what I've been doing is, I'll do my article in for each month. So for when I get in the May's article, I'll walk through and I'll really get into, there's some months that I barely, like, hey, we had 12 fires, we had 18 fires, this type, and normally I do an annual report, that's available on LinkedIn, and it's, I think it's, there's a lot of places they can find it, they can email me to get a copy of it. But I do an annual report every year. So I've done 17, 18, and 19, that I'll literally dive into by state, by tonnage, how many fire incidences, like I really get into all the details. Each month, it just depends. I mean, so this month I will definitely like delve into what we're seeing. Like I was saying before, the first week we had one fire in a transfer station, and like that was it. There were no scrap fires, there were no chemical fires, there was no, no organic fires. And then all of a sudden, the second week, I think there were 9 or 10. I mean, I think we're up to 13 now for the month because I'm doing it every day. And I have my webinars every Thursday at 12 Eastern that I've been doing just because, there's been a lot of interest in, as people are working from home, they're interested in educating, or working on education. So, I think it's been really nice that, we're getting a lot more participation, or at least I am in my webinars. So I'm trying to bring different perspectives from, so like this week I'll have Jim Emerson, who takes it from a fire engineer, but also from the insurance audit side. And then I have a few other guests each week. So, I mean, the answer is yes. I mean, I'm going to get into this and really walk through every fire that we're seeing now. Also, I'll be talking about the number of fires that, we're saving, which is getting more and more. We've saved over 200 fires in the last year with Fire Rover. So at some point, I'm going to start to combine that data. And then I'm also working with EREF on they're doing a fire survey. So, to give a shout out to that, the goal is to get as many waste and recycling companies, including scrap metal facilities, to participate in the survey. And, so there we're looking at a bunch of different type of data, but, really to me, the biggest thing that I want to see out of this is if you have a fire, how long is your facility shut down for? There was a report in MSW magazine looking at European, waste and recycling facilities, and over 75% of facilities that had a fire were down for more than a day. So again, business continuity really, I mean, when you have garbage that leaves your curbside, if it has nowhere to go and can't be processed, that causes issues in a micro perspective. So, that really is the biggest piece that I'm excited to see out of those. But, if anyone's listening and they haven't provided access to or provided access to that survey, I would definitely go to the Environmental Research and Education Foundation website, or they can email me, and I'm happy to send them a link to fill out the survey. But it's all confidential, and I'm going to take all the reported data that we have and roll that into the results so that we can get some really decent analysis, which this should be unprecedented for the industry, which I've been pushing for like 5 years, and I'm really happy that Brian's been, doing that at EREF. So.
Oh, that's great. I can't wait to see that. Well, thank you, Ryan, so much. I feel like I learned so much from this conversation, and I look forward to hearing more and reading more. So thanks for spending this time today, and stay well.
No, and honestly, and I appreciate it. And again, I do want to say one last thing, that literally I'm extremely proud of the industry for what they've done in the last 5 years to change and really fight these fires, right? 5 years ago, people were just ignoring the problem, honestly. And like they would point fingers at operations or safety as a breakdown if there was a fire. And now, I mean, the major, the major OEMs in our market are embracing the problem, embracing solutions, embracing education, and really, they're doing something that hopefully we'll start to see, even with the increase in risk, we'll see less and less of these fires happening, which is obviously the goal that we're looking for. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll talk soon. Take care.